Hey girls, it's Wednesday! So last week was fun. I hope that you all enjoyed it as much as I did. I thought the challenges were really fun. But this week is book week, which is really exciting because I love books. I have always been a big reader, like, since I learned how to read in, like, first grade. We had this program in elementary school called Junior Great Books, where we would, like, the top readers of the school, well, of my first grade class, we would go to these meetings like once a week, and we would have a story to read, and we had this like thick book that had a bunch of stories in it, and like once a week or something we would have to read a story, and then we would come into this meeting every week and talk about the story that we had read. And they were a little bit more difficult to read than what the rest of the first graders were reading. But I loved it. It was like the coolest thing ever for me. And then my love of books just grew from there. Like, my parents used to get so mad at me when I was little because I wouldn't ever want to do anything except read. And, like, I would be sitting on the couch in the living room reading a book for hours on end. And then my mom would be like, "Why don't you go outside and play with your brothers?" And so I would take my book outside and go sit outside and read my book while my brothers did other things. And then I was also one of those kids who, like, tried to stay up late and read after I was supposed to be in bed. I would, like, hide under the curtain because it would still be light outside, and so I would take my book into the window and, like, read by the light of the still outside. It's not good for your eyes, don't do that. But so some of my favorite books, when I was in elementary school, I read all of the Goosebumps books. Like, every one that we had in my school library and in the public library, and any Goosebumps book that I could get a hold of, and any of the other R.L. Stine books. And then I went through a phase where I read all of the Sweet Valley books, the junior high. I'd never read the kids ones, like the Sweet Valley Kids, but I read all of the Sweet Valley Junior High and Sweet Valley High and the university ones, and then they had that other series, the senior year series, which happened after the earthquake. If any of you have read the Sweet Valley High books, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then of course there was Harry Potter, which I loved. I also loved reading the, like, kind of weirder, scary novels. I read some Christopher Pike in high school. I've read 2 Stephen King books, and they are both really good. I read Rose Madder, which was really strange, very strange book, but it was good. And then I've also read It, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So good. Freaking scary. Love it. Another one of my favorite books is Wicked by Gregory Maguire, which is the story of the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. And it's the book that the musical Wicked was based on. Such a good book. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. The beginning is a little bit slow because it's kind of introducing you to, like, all of the politics of the world in which this is taking place. But once you get to where Elphaba goes to school, so good. Such a good book. I also love reading plays. I don't know if any of you have much experience reading plays, but as a theater major in college, I obviously had to read a lot of plays. Plays are so much different than novels. It's a very different experience when you're reading them, but I think they're really interesting to read. It's obviously also a lot different than like watching a play as opposed to reading it. But I think it's really interesting, and so I have a few anthologies of plays and some single plays that I have read or am wanting to read. I got the complete works of William Shakespeare for Christmas last year, and I've sort of been working on reading other things I'm reading right now. I do have Wizard's First Rule, which is the first book in the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind, and it's really good. I'm having a really hard time getting into it for some reason. I think a lot of it has to do that I just watched it all. But other than that, lately I've been reading a lot of fan fiction. Mostly supernatural or Harry Potter fan fiction. I wanted to read 50 books this year, but I'm only at 10 so far. That means I have 40 books left to read, and we're, over halfway through the year, so that's gonna be tough. But I still have hope that I will do it. But I read John Green's books because I had not read them before, and I also read a bunch of books by David Levithan, who I think is fantastic. And if you haven't read him, or if you haven't read John Green, definitely check them both out because they're good. But yeah, so that's kind of what I have read, am reading, am looking forward to reading. If you want to recommend any books to me, the only kind of books that I really don't like are really like historical books. I don't really read nonfiction at all. Unless it's like really, really interesting. But if you know any good plays, or if you know any good like scary books or fantasy books, definitely tell me and I will try and check them out. And that's all I have. So, Sarah, I will see you tomorrow.